fellow book nerds. Today I am reviewing Lord Loss. It is book 1 in the Demonata series by Darren Shan, and this is one of my personal favorite series. If you've never read a Darren Shan book, you should. And if you're already a part of the Shandom, well then hello there. Welcome to my channel. Please discuss these books with me. But please no spoilers for the people who have not actually read it. I was first introduced to Darren Shan's writing through the Cirque du Freak books, or the Saga of Darren Shan, and I immediately fell in love with his writing style. The Cirque du Freak books were more kid-oriented, but they can be enjoyed at any age. I read them kind of more in my 13 to 15-ish age range, and even now at 20 years old I've reread this series multiple times. And the Demonata series I read more towards 16-ish age after I had read Cirque du Freak and already had an appreciation for Darren Shan and his books, but I gained even more appreciation for Darren Shan and his writing style after reading these books. This book is about a kid named Grubbs Grady, and although it doesn't tell you his exact age, I estimated him to be maybe about 14 or 15, but the first time I felt like he was probably more 16. There are 10 books total in this series, and not all of them focus on Grubbs. There are actually 3 main characters that pop up throughout the entire series. Certain books focus on certain main characters. Some books may focus on Grubbs while others focus on the other 2 main characters, until eventually we kind of figure out how they all connect together. The first book focuses on Grubbs, who, after an unfortunate run-in with the Demon Master Lord Loss, he moves in with his uncle Dervish and eventually learns about the world of demons and magic. He is the most prominent character out of the 3 main characters. Technically, this book can be read as a standalone book. You don't have to finish the entire series, but I definitely recommend it because you get to learn more about the other main characters that aren't even introduced in the first book, and you get to learn more of the backstory with Lord Loss and other demons. Darren Shan also has a really great dark humor in his books, so although they can be heavy at times, they're also very humorous. Another thing that I love about Darren Shan's writing is that he's not afraid to go there. It's made clear quite early in this book that it is a very gruesome world. It's a book about demons, and these demons are not tame in any way, shape, or form. Darren Shan holds nothing back in these books. Sure, there's not a whole lot of swearing, so it is still like a teen fantasy book or a young adult book, but that doesn't mean he holds back on any of the horror. I also really enjoyed that Grubbs is very much human in this book. He reacts to situations how a normal human being would. And although he's a teenage boy and he is a strong character, he has some breakdowns in this book. He actually kind of cries frequently, but he's not overreacting in these situations. He has very normal human reactions to these abnormal situations. If you enjoy books with supernatural elements like demons and magic, I definitely recommend these books, but they're not exactly for the faint of heart. If you don't like horror, then they may not be the book for you, but I definitely recommend them. It's one of my favorite series. Alright, so everyone who has not read this book, you can go now. I'm going to start spoiling things left and right. And if you already have read the books, please stay. I'm going to review it in further detail. So right off the bat, we get introduced to Grubbs and his family, and of course, we get the brutal murder of his entire family within like the first 30 pages. I was glad that we didn't get to know his family too well, because then we would have been more attached and the murders would have been that much more horrible. But that being said, we only got a chapter with them, but it was still a brutal scene. Grubbs having to walk in on that is horrible, and it was extremely traumatizing for him. It's a wordless scream, pure hatred, pure sorrow. It builds from somewhere deep within me and bursts forth with the same impossible force I summoned when lobbing the telephone at Artery and diving through the dog flap. The glass in the window shatters and explodes inwards, ripping curtains to shreds, littering floors with jagged, transparent shards. The glass in the houses to either side also explodes, and in the nearby cars and street lamps, I scream as long as I can, perhaps a full minute without pause, then lapse into a silence as all-encompassing as the scream. It's an isolated silence, almost solid. No sounds trickle out and none penetrate. He just walked in on his parents and his sister laying in bloody heaps all over the floor and scattered in pieces. I really enjoy that he actually has to go to an institute for a while. He needs time to process this, and I'm glad that we got like multiple chapters of him coming to terms with it and struggling with the fact that he has lost his entire family and that demons are actually real. The intro to Dervish sketched me out the first time I read this book, because I was slightly concerned that this guy actually wasn't his uncle, or that it was someone who was going to do something really bad. But of course we end up loving Dervish because he's the greatest uncle ever. I remember being extremely weirded out and just frustrated at the fact that there was so much chess going on. I couldn't imagine having to play chess over and over and over again my entire life. I enjoy playing it every once in a while, but I would drive myself insane if I had to play it that much. I also pronounce the town as Carcery Vale, even though I think it's supposed to be Carcery, but it just didn't sound right to me, and now that's stuck in my head, and when I go back and look at it, it even pronounces it for you, and it's Carcery. Billy Spleen. Meeting him for the first time, I really didn't know if I was going to like him or not. I liked that he was kind of sassy and wasn't afraid to put himself out there, but at the same time I was a little skeptical at who this kid was and why he was just wandering around and introducing himself. But of course, like Dervish, I learned to trust him and I learned to love him. I love when we get little tidbits of humor in this. There's a part where Dervish and Grubbs were playing chess and Grubbs was playing really bad and Dervish freaks out on him. "You've got to love the game," he told me last night, tossing a captured rook at me with unexpected force. "Chess is life. You have to love it as you love living. If you don't..." He said no more. Just stormed out of the room, leaving me at a loss for words, rubbing my cheek where the rook struck. Later, when I'd recovered and was passing him in the hall on my way to bed, I muttered, "Get a life, you freak." The perfect comeback. Just an hour too late. I can't tell you the amount of times where I've come up with the perfect comeback hours after something. And it's so frustrating to know that you have the perfect comeback, but you can't voice it because it is too late. We learned that Lord Sheftry was actually an owner of the house at one point and that he possibly buried some treasure somewhere around, and so you get Billy and Grubbs bonding over trying to find treasure out in the woods. Did anyone else think that Billy was actually Dervish's son? When Billy first brings it up, I actually thought it sounded pretty legitimate. But I was still a little skeptical, but I went with it. I rolled with it. It sounded good, and it made sense. Then at the end, when we figure out Grubbs is actually his half-brother, I think I could have died. We get introduced to Mira Flame, and I love her so much. She's very aware of her female abilities to persuade men, but doesn't toy with them. She does everything good-naturedly, but with just enough of a spice to make it amazing. And I was really hoping that Dervish and Mira were actually a thing in this book. They kept denying it, but I was like, come on, you guys gotta get together sometime, right? Then one day when Billy and Grubbs are in the woods, they see Dervish walking around, and we come to find out that he's been picking up dead animal bodies that have been ripped apart and been incinerating them at some secret incinerator. And Billy decides that Dervish has to be a werewolf. He's picking up the animals that he's been killing. And Billy's been really sick recently, but he decides to stay with Grubbs overnight because it's the full moon and they think that Dervish might do something weird because they saw him taking a deer down into a cellar. And I didn't actually think Dervish was a werewolf. I thought there was probably some other explanation, or that it was going to turn out to be somebody else, maybe Mira, and that Dervish was just covering for her. And that's why she only comes every once in a while, because she's only there for full moons to be locked up. But then it turns out that it's actually Billy, and that's why he's been sick. It's because of the moon, and that he's actually going to be turning into a werewolf. And I can honestly say I did not see that one coming, although it was really obvious that I probably should have. So then Billy turns and he knocks Mira unconscious, and she's like in a coma. And then Dervish tells Grubbs all about how Billy's related, and now we are finally learning more about Lord Loss, because we don't talk about him the entire book. His storyline is pretty much dropped through the majority of this book, and it's because Grubbs is trying to get over the fact that his parents were murdered and that his sister was murdered and that Lord Loss was behind it all, and he doesn't want to really know about it. So basically the entire book we're in the dark about who Lord Loss really is, until the end where we get the big explanation. And we finally figure out what the hell is going on with all the chessboards. A long time ago, Bartholomew Garadex is the magician that was part of the ancestry to Grubbs, and he found Lord Loss and found out his love for chess, found out that he can cure the lycanthropy in their family. So he comes up with this system that he will play chess against Lord Loss, and in return, if he wins, he will cure one of the family members of lycanthropy. After his death, obviously, the game changes, and then we've got 5 games going on simultaneously, and we've got demons trying to massacre another guy that's tag teaming it. And it's nearly impossible, but some people have survived, so some people risk it. And some people decide it's too risky to call in Lord Loss and just decide to put that child out of its misery because it's not really their child anymore. And others can't deal with doing it themselves, so they call in the lambs. And they're basically the family executioners. They come in and do it for you. So Dervish goes ahead and tells all of this backstory about Lord Loss to Grubbs because he wants Grubbs to be his second and help Billy be cured by Lord Loss. And obviously Grubbs is not a great chess player at all, so Dervish is the one who's going to be up against Lord Loss, and he wants Grubbs to battle the demons that tried to kill him at the very beginning of the book and were the ones that slaughtered his entire family. Obviously this is a bit traumatizing to Grubbs because he's already had to deal with them once and he almost died, and he still has the memory of his parents and his sister being gruesomely murdered by the 2 demons. Needless to say, he flips shit and says, "No, I'm not going to do it, are you crazy?" But his conscience kind of wins out and he decides, I will not be able to live with myself knowing that I didn't try. So he decides to help Dervish. I love seeing that Dervish's favorite chess set was the Lord of the Rings one because me and my brother actually have one of those chess sets. If you've got friends who can help, why ask me? Billy's your brother, I thought you might want to be a part of this. But it doesn't make sense. You need the best person for the job, why offer it to me? Ideally, I want to face Lord Loss with someone who's proved their courage and ability under fire. Someone who's faced a demon and lived. I only personally know 6 people who have done that. Mira was one of them, but she can't do it now. What about the others? 4 of them are currently out of contact. And the 6th? You're the 6th. I love how Dervish basically accepts that Grubbs doesn't want to participate because he knows about the background that he has with these demons. But at the same time, Dervish would really rather have Grubbs help him out because Grubbs is one of 6 people that he knows who have actually faced demons and survived. I hated the fact that even if you defeat Lord Loss at the 5 games of chess and your second doesn't get killed by the demons and all that's won, yes, that person gets cured of lycanthropy, but whoever is facing him at the chessboards has to go into the demon realm and defeat Lord Loss there. I obviously thought it was really interesting and I loved that it was a part of the book, but that sucks so bad, so I hated it just as much as I loved it. So then we get to the battle. Grubbs is going up against Artery and Vein, and it's terrifying but amazing and action-packed. And Grubbs is not faring too well. At one point he gets his foot bitten off and there's blood squirting out everywhere. And he basically just accepts death like, oh, well, there's that. There's gonna be too much blood loss. I don't have a foot anymore. Might as well give up. And then he remembers that obviously there's magic involved and they are repairing themselves. Why can't I? So then he like flings his foot back across the room and it sews itself back together. And then he gets cocky and does exactly what Dervish told him not to do and attacks rather than defends. And then he gets stuck up against the webs and his back is cracked in like 5 places and he's stuck there. And then Dervish comes to the rescue and saves his ass. And Lord Loss is like, oh, well, you just forfeited the game. You just got up from our chess game. You can't do that. But then they decide to just switch places. Might as well, right? Lord Loss agrees, and then freaking Grubbs has to go up against him, and he is horrible at chess. And it goes very badly for quite a while until Grubbs decides, hey, he chose me because I don't have any skills, so might as well play that to my advantage. Lord Loss feeds on pain, might as well be happy and just nonchalant and just be like, whatever. And it obviously works in his favor, but at the same time, he pisses off Lord Loss so much that he vows revenge. Now this is not good from like a demon, but let alone a demon master. This is not good news for Grubbs at all. But they end up winning and Dervish has to go face Lord Loss in the other demon dimension. So Dervish's soul is basically gone and he's walking around for about a year without his soul. And this entire time Grubbs, he starts going back to school, but he can't leave the house very much because obviously that's the only place he's actually protected from Lord Loss and he doesn't know when he will come back and try to attack him. And then when Billy wakes up, Grubbs decides not to tell him the truth He doesn't tell him that they're actually half-brothers. He lets Billy go on assuming that Dervish is his uncle, and that Dervish was actually the werewolf, not Billy, and that Grubbs had to cast a spell on Dervish, and that's why he's walking around zombified. And ever since this, Grubbs has not been able to sleep well on full moon nights in fear of turning into a werewolf. And one night on the full moon, about a year after the battle with Lord Loss, he wakes up to find dirt and blood and hair and stuff on his face and under his nails, and he thinks he turned into a werewolf and that he's been killing animals. And automatically he runs down the stairs kind of freaking out, and then he has this kind of calm wash over him, and he's like, okay, I'm going to be turning into a werewolf. I have nobody to help me out in this situation, and I don't want anybody to face Lord Lost for me. He had already told Dervish that the year before, and so he's like, alright, might as well call the lambs. And then out of nowhere, we get Dervish behind him, and he turns around and he's like, you should have seen your face. And that's how the book ends. So Dervish is okay. He won against Lord Loss, and Grubbs isn't actually turning into a werewolf, and everything is peachy. But then, of course, if you read the rest of the series, you know that things don't turn out so peachy for anybody. But at the end of this book, it wraps up nicely. So I really loved Grubbs as a character, that he started out as this naive kind of prankster kid, and then after the death of his family, he turns into this really solemn, morose, like, devastated character, and he ends up picking himself back up. He recovers, and then he has to face Lord Loss again. He learns about the lycanthropy and his family's curse, and then he starts going back to school, you know? He has a very nice arc over this book. And Dervish and Billy are really great characters as well, and they all add very nicely to this book. Alright, fellow book nerds, I hope you enjoyed this review of Lord Loss, and if you did, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos. I will be reviewing the entire rest of this series. Have a great rest of your day, and watch out for the Demonata. Love you!